For most of my life, I thought I was a lucky woman. I had a husband who smiled at me every morning, kissed my forehead before work, and said, "Don't wait up, honey. I might be late tonight." And I didn't think twice about it. That was our routine for nearly 25 years. I trusted him. I cooked his favorite meals. I stayed up on the couch some nights, half asleep, waiting for the sound of his car in the driveway. Sometimes, he'd come home after midnight, smelling faintly of coffee and perfume I didn't recognize. But I told myself, he works with people. Maybe it's nothing. It's funny how women always notice things before they understand them. Little changes start to whisper. The way he looked at his phone and smiled when he thought I wasn't watching. The way he started keeping his work bag in the car. Still, I didn't want to believe it. When you built a life with someone for so long, you hold on to the version of him that made you feel safe, even when the truth starts to knock. One evening, I made his favorite stew, the one I always cooked when the weather turned cold. I called him at 6. No answer. At 7, I texted. No reply. By 10, I was sitting alone at the kitchen table, the stew cold, my heart heavier than my plate. When he finally came home past midnight, I smiled and said softly, "Long day, huh?" He kissed my cheek and muttered, "Yeah, just work," before heading straight to the shower. But that night, while folding laundry, I found something in his jacket pocket, a receipt. It wasn't from his office, and it wasn't for gas or food. It was for a dinner, 2 glasses of wine, 2 entrees, and 1 dessert. Dated 2 nights ago. And the name on the bill wasn't his. It was hers. I sat there in silence, staring at that paper. My hands shaking, my mind refusing to believe. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't hit you like a thunderstorm. It comes quietly, in the form of a receipt that tells you your world isn't what you thought it was. But I didn't confront him that night. Something inside me said, wait. Because deep down, I knew. That receipt was just the beginning. The next morning, I tried to pretend everything was fine. I made his coffee, packed his lunch, and smiled like I always did. But inside, my heart was whispering a question I didn't want to ask. Who is she? I folded the receipt and tucked it deep into my apron pocket, as if hiding it would make it untrue. When he came down for breakfast, I studied his face. The same kind eyes, the same tired smile. But once you start doubting someone, even their kindness feels rehearsed. He kissed my forehead. "See you tonight, sweetheart," he said. And just like that, another day began. That evening wasn't just another day, though. It was our 25th wedding anniversary. A date that used to mean laughter, music, and his silly habit of bringing me red roses because that's what love smells like. But that night, the table stayed empty. No candles. No laughter. No husband. I called him once. Twice. Straight to voicemail. By midnight, I stopped calling. I sat there, staring at the photo on the wall, our wedding day. I was so young. So certain that love meant forever. Around 12:30, I heard his car. I didn't move. He came in quietly, probably hoping I was asleep. But when I asked, "Do you even know what day it is?" he froze. He looked down, sighed, and said, "I'm sorry. Work ran late." Just like that. No flowers, no explanation, just another excuse. He went upstairs, and I sat there, alone, listening to the sound of the shower running, and realizing the sound of water can't wash away betrayal. The next morning, I decided to follow my instincts. Not out of anger, but because something inside me needed the truth. So I waited until he left for work. And this time, I didn't sit around wondering. I took my keys, got in the car, and drove toward the one place he said he always worked late, the firm downtown. But when I got there, the receptionist smiled politely and said, "Oh, Mr. Roberts. He hasn't been working here for months." My heart stopped. If he wasn't working late there, where was he? That was the moment I realized, the man I loved might be living a whole other life. And I was about to find it. I drove home from that office with my heart pounding like a drum I couldn't silence. The receptionist's words echoed in my head, "He hasn't worked here for months." Months. That meant every late night, every cold dinner, every "I'm still at the office" text was a lie. When I got home, I sat in the car for a long time. The house looked the same, warm lights in the windows, the smell of cinnamon from the candle I'd left burning. But nothing felt like home anymore. I went inside and stood in our bedroom, staring at his closet. Half of me wanted to scream. The other half wanted to know why. I started searching through his things, not out of hate, but out of heartbreak. I looked through drawers, old papers, his nightstand. That's when I found it. At the bottom of his gym bag was a red silk scarf. It wasn't mine. It smelled faintly of perfume, sweet, floral, and unfamiliar. My knees went weak. I sat on the floor, holding it in my lap, staring at it like it could explain itself. A scarf. Such a small thing, but it carried the weight of 1,000 lies. I thought about every night he came home late, every smile that didn't reach his eyes, every time I told myself, "You're just being paranoid." And suddenly, it wasn't paranoia anymore. It was proof. The next evening, I told him I was visiting my sister, but instead, I followed him. He didn't notice me behind his car as he drove through town, turning down a quiet street lined with oak trees. Then I saw it, a small white house with blue curtains. He parked out front. A woman came out the door, and she was holding a little girl's hand. He smiled. He lifted the child into his arms, and the woman kissed him like she had every right to. I remember gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because in that one moment, I realized my husband wasn't just unfaithful. He was living another life. I didn't confront him right away. No, I wanted to hear the lies fall from his mouth one more time, just to see how far he'd go to protect his secret. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, watching the clock tick past midnight, waiting for the sound of his car in the driveway. When the headlights finally swept across the living room wall, my heart started to race. He walked in, humming softly, like a man with nothing to hide. His smile faded when he saw me sitting there in the dark. "Mary?" he said quietly. "You scared me. Why are you up?" I looked at him for a long time before I spoke. "Where were you tonight, Richard?" He blinked, caught off guard, then smiled that same practiced smile. "Work ran late again. You know how it is." I nodded slowly. "Yeah. Except the office says you haven't worked there for months." The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. That silence, it told me more than any lie ever could. I stood up, holding the red scarf in my hand. "Does she wear this when you kiss her goodnight?" He froze. His eyes flickered, shame, guilt, maybe even fear. Then he said softly, "It's not what you think." Those words. Those same empty words men say when the truth is already standing in front of them. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it hurt too much to cry. "Not what I think? You have another home, Richard. Another woman. A child. What part of that am I misunderstanding?" He tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't want his touch. "I didn't plan this," he whispered. "It just happened." That was the worst part. He said it like an accident, like falling in love with someone else was something he tripped into. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You didn't just fall into it, Richard. You built it, brick by brick, while I waited here for a man who didn't exist anymore." He didn't argue. He didn't even deny it. He just sat down, buried his face in his hands, and said, "I never wanted to hurt you. But pain doesn't wait for permission." It was already here, sitting in the space between us, breaking everything we'd ever built. The next morning, I thought he'd leave for good. But instead, I found something in his car that changed everything. A photo that proved this betrayal went much deeper than I imagined. The next morning, the air felt heavy. The house that once smelled like coffee and pancakes now felt like a stranger's home, quiet, cold, and hollow. Richard barely looked at me. He grabbed his keys, mumbled something about needing to clear his head, and walked out the door. For a moment, I stood there, frozen. Then something inside me, that same small voice that had whispered the truth all along, said, "Follow him." So I did. I waited a few minutes, then got in my car and drove. He didn't go far, just across town, to that same quiet street lined with oak trees. The white house. The blue curtains. And her. I parked a few houses down, watching as he walked up the driveway with flowers in his hand. He looked calm, comfortable, like he belonged there. I thought my heart couldn't break anymore, but it did. He knocked. The door opened. That little girl came running into his arms again, shouting, "Daddy! Daddy!" I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my hands started to ache. Tears blurred my vision, but I couldn't look away. He had a whole other world. A life that didn't include me at all. I drove home in silence. Every mile felt like a memory I was leaving behind. When I got back, I noticed his car wasn't there. But something inside it caught my eye, a photo, half tucked under the sun visor. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a picture of him, the woman, and that same little girl, smiling together in front of a Christmas tree. But what froze me wasn't the picture itself. It was the date written on the back. Christmas Day, 2 years ago. 2 years. That meant this wasn't new. He'd been living this life for years, smiling at me every morning while spending holidays with them. I sank to the ground beside the car, the photo shaking in my hands. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was whisper, "How long, Richard? How long have you been loving two families?" That night, when he came home, I didn't yell. I just placed the photograph on the kitchen table and said softly, "You don't need to lie anymore. I already met them." He froze, and the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. Remorse. But no surprise. That was the night I made my decision. Not to forgive. Not to fight. But to leave, quietly, and with the dignity he'd already thrown away. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was still, but my heart wasn't. I sat on the edge of our bed, the same bed where we shared dreams, laughter, and now, silence. He was still asleep, lying on his side like nothing had happened. For a moment, I just looked at him, the man I once thought I'd grow old with. He looked peaceful. I wasn't. I stood up, opened the closet, and started packing my things. Not out of anger, but because I finally understood something. Sometimes, leaving isn't weakness. It's the only way to save what's left of yourself. As I folded my clothes, I found an old photo album tucked behind a stack of sweaters. Pictures of us, smiling at the beach, laughing on Christmas morning, dancing in the kitchen. I ran my fingers over the pictures, and a tear slipped down my cheek. Those memories were real. But the man in them wasn't who I thought he was anymore. I didn't take the album. I left it behind. Because I didn't need reminders of a life built on half-truths. By the time he woke up, my suitcase was by the door. He rubbed his eyes, confused. "Where are you going?" I looked at him calmly. "Somewhere you can't follow." He stood there in silence, trying to think of something to say. But there were no words big enough to fix what he broke. "I never meant to hurt you," he said again, voice shaking. I nodded slowly. "You didn't just hurt me, Richard. You erased me." I picked up my bag, turned toward the door, and paused. "I hope she was worth it," I said quietly, not out of hate, but out of sadness. When I stepped outside, the morning air hit my face like a new beginning. The sun was rising, soft and golden, the kind of light that feels like forgiveness. But I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. I drove away with tears blurring my eyes, but for the first time in months, the road ahead felt like mine again. But the story didn't end there. Because 2 weeks later, that same woman, the one he betrayed me with, showed up at my door, holding something that would change everything. 2 weeks passed since I left that house. I'd moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, just me, my coffee mug, and a silence that finally felt like peace. Some days, I missed him. Not the man who lied to me, but the man I thought he was. It's strange how you can grieve for someone who's still alive. That morning, I was watering the little plant by my window when I heard a knock at the door. At first, I thought it might be the landlord or a neighbor. But when I opened the door, my heart stopped. It was her. The woman from the White House. The one who'd been holding that little girl's hand. She looked nervous, her eyes red, hands trembling as she clutched a small envelope. "Mrs. Roberts?" she said softly. I didn't answer. I just stared. I know I shouldn't be here," she continued, her voice breaking. "But I needed to see you." I stepped aside slowly and let her in. She stood in the middle of my living room, looking around, maybe realizing how empty it was. She took a deep breath. "I didn't know about you. Not at first. He told me he was divorced. He said you moved away." Her words hit me like a wave. So she hadn't stolen him. He'd stolen the truth from both of us. She reached into her bag and handed me the envelope. "He wanted you to have this. He gave it to me a few days before he..." She stopped. Her voice trembled. "Before he what?" Before I could ask, she whispered, "He is gone. He had a heart attack last week." My knees went weak. Even after everything, My heart didn't know how to hate him enough to stop hurting. I took the envelope from her hands. It had my name written in his handwriting, shaky, uneven, like he'd written it in a hurry. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to ruin your life. I loved him too. But I think he loved you in a way I never could understand." She left quietly, closing the door behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at that envelope, too afraid to open it. Because deep down, I knew, whatever was inside that letter would be the last thing he ever said to me. And I wasn't sure my heart was ready to hear it. The envelope sat on my table for hours. I made coffee, tried to read, even turned on the radio, but my eyes kept going back to it. It felt heavy, like it carried not just words, but years of silence. Finally, I sat down, took a deep breath, and opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, his handwriting, uneven but familiar. "Mary, if you're reading this, I didn't get the chance to explain. I never meant for things to happen this way. I didn't plan to fall for anyone else, I swear I didn't. But somewhere along the line, I became two different men. One who loved his family, and one who kept running from his own loneliness." I paused, my eyes burning. Loneliness. That word stung. Because how could he feel lonely when I was right there, loving him every single day? I kept reading. I thought I could keep both worlds separate. But that lie has eaten me alive. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. The little girl. Her name is Emily. She's mine, Mary. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to destroy what we had left. But the truth always finds a way to come out. My heart sank. The child I saw, the one who called him Daddy, was really his daughter. I kept reading, tears falling onto the page. "I want you to know, no matter how much I failed you, I love you. You were the best part of my life. I never stopped loving you, even when I didn't deserve to." I folded the letter slowly and held it against my chest. There was no anger left. Just emptiness. It's strange, the same man who broke me still had the power to make me cry with his words. I sat there until the sun began to set, its light falling across the letter on the table. I whispered, "You didn't lose me because you loved her, Richard. You lost me because you stopped being honest." That night, I didn't sleep. Every memory, every smile, every quiet moment replayed in my mind, not as love, but as lessons. And the next morning, I knew what I had to do, to face the little girl who had no idea her father's lies had broken two families, and give her the truth he never could. The next morning, I woke with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months. The kind of calm that comes when you stop asking why and start accepting what is. I put on my coat, took the letter, and drove back to that quiet street, the one lined with oak trees. His other home. The one I used to drive past with tears in my eyes. When I pulled up, she was there, the woman, sitting on the porch, holding a cup of coffee, her face pale and tired. She looked up and froze when she saw me. I walked toward her slowly, holding the letter against my chest. "I'm not here to fight," I said softly. "I just need to talk." She nodded, eyes wet. "She's inside. Emily. She's been asking about her dad." The words twisted my heart. I hesitated, then stepped inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and baby powder. On the wall, there were family photos, Richard smiling, holding the little girl, looking happier than I'd seen him in years. It hurt. But there was something innocent about it too, something pure that had nothing to do with betrayal. Then I saw her, Emily. She was sitting on the floor, coloring, her tiny fingers gripping a crayon. She looked up at me with big brown eyes, his eyes. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just knelt down beside her and smiled. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm a friend of your daddy's." She smiled shyly and handed me her drawing. "It's my daddy and me," she said proudly. My throat tightened. "It's beautiful," I managed to say. Her mother walked over, standing quietly beside me. "She doesn't understand," she whispered. "I haven't told her yet." I nodded. "You don't have to. Let her remember him the way she knew him, the way we both once did." I placed the letter on the table. "This belongs to her someday. Not now, not yet, but one day, she should know who he really was." We stood there in silence, two women bound by the same man's lies, and the same grief. There were no more tears left, just understanding. Before I left, Emily ran up and hugged my leg. "You smell like my daddy's hugs," she said softly. I smiled through the ache. Maybe that's because he loved us both in his own broken way. As I walked out of that house, I realized, closure doesn't always come with forgiveness. Sometimes, it comes when you finally let go and walk away without turning back. When I got home that evening, the house felt different. Not empty, just lighter. The pain was still there, but it wasn't crushing me anymore. It had turned into something quieter, something I could finally breathe through. I sat by the window, watching the sun go down, the same golden light I watched with him so many times before. Only this time, it didn't make me sad. It reminded me that even endings can be beautiful if you face them with honesty. For so many years, I built my world around a man who couldn't tell the truth. But that day, I realized, my life didn't end with his lies. It began the moment I stopped living inside them. I poured myself a cup of tea and opened a fresh notebook, something I hadn't done in years. I wrote one sentence on the first page. This time, I'm choosing me, I smiled. Not because I was healed yet, but because for the first time, I was trying. Later that night, I went outside, holding that red scarf one last time. It had once represented betrayal, pain, loss. Now, it was just fabric. I let the wind take it from my hands, watching it drift down the empty street until it disappeared. And in that moment, I felt free. People say heartbreak destroys you, but I don't believe that anymore. Heartbreak reveals you, shows you the parts of yourself you forgot while loving someone else. He may have had another family, another life, another love. But I still had something he'd lost a long time ago, peace. I closed the door, took a deep breath, and whispered to the quiet room, I forgive you, Richard, not for you, but for me. Then I turned off the lights, walked to my room, and for the first time in years, I slept without waiting for anyone to come home. Because sometimes, love doesn't mean holding on. Sometimes, it means knowing when to let go, and still choosing to live with an open heart. Broken heart emoji, sparkles emoji.